Fantastic. Just want to look at some of the vision and values. Thanks, Kay. And something of the vision that we talked about last time, but just want to reiterate it for us, is that Movement for Recovery, in many cases, will be building on the great work that you've already been doing in Unity, some of you on this call for many, many years. And this is building on that. It's not separate from it, but it's building on it. But I think what we're trying to do is trying to build a wider network of networks. We're trying to build an engagement vehicle, a delivery vehicle, a support structure, and we're hoping to develop a bigger conversation. So that's the vision. Let me just go through those in a bit more detail. Thanks, Kay. Firstly, we think it's really important, if we are to respond to the recovery of our cities and towns. And our cities and towns, as you know, are deeply in need. And we're trying to respond as one church to that need. Certainly, there are a number of recovery plans being developed by councils and cities. And we, I suppose, want to take our part in that recovery process. To do that, we need to build as wide a network of networks as possible. So that needs to involve churches. It needs to involve charities. It needs to involve networks of churches and denominations, of course. It needs to involve prayer networks, Christians also in their neighborhoods and Christians in their workplaces. I don't think this is just a response from institutions like churches and charities, but I think it's bigger than that. I think it's actually about how I, as a neighbor, can be part of this movement for recovery, and so on. So I think it's the widest possible network of networks. Now, some of you already have that as that's part of what you do. Others of you, perhaps a bit more niche within your city, or you haven't managed to, so far engage the wider church context, or there's certain groups perhaps you don't struggle to connect with. This really is trying to aim for a much wider connectivity. So that's what we're trying to do. Thanks, Kay. Secondly, to do that, then we're hoping to create, with a Movement for Recovery, a robust engagement vehicle. So as the council and as housing and police and health and social care and private and the VCFSE sector are developing their own recovery plans, we want to be part of that engagement. We want to be one of those circles, I suppose, in that conversation, so that we're able to add our, what we do best to that. And of course, what we do best is we're on the ground, we have the buildings, we have the staff, we are churches and charities connecting right across the age range, and delivering some great services to those in debt, or those in food poverty or whatever. So what we're trying to do is make sure that engagement vehicle is as strong as possible. So we're part of that engagement to them. It's not just a one-way conversation. It's not just public services saying to us what their issues are. We're also shaping the recovery process in every town and every city. So that's part of this process. Thank you, Kay. Also then, yeah, thanks, Kay. It's also a delivery vehicle. So the recovery priorities of the city, through the Movement to Recovery, to the network of churches and charities and people, then produced what we hope is, thanks, Kay, the needs of the city. So that then becomes a delivery vehicle. So as we hear what the needs are, as we're part of the prioritization of those needs, we then hopefully respond to those needs. Now, in part, on the ground, we'll know our areas better than anybody, but also there'll be aspects of our areas we won't know about. So we need to be engaging at a civic level as well. So it's an engagement vehicle. It's a delivery vehicle as well. Thank you, Kay. And also, thank you, Kay, it's also a support structure. So as we develop the Movement for Recovery, we're going to be hopefully sharing best practice with each other. We're going to be identifying the gaps. We're going to be hopefully eliminating some duplication if there is any. We're going to be praying for each other. And we're going to continually, of course, be building relationships. Now, these sort of things are part and parcel, bread and butter to what many of you do on a regular basis in your Unity expressions. For some of you, they may be a bit more new, or some of them, there may be aspects of which you do, but not aspects of others. We do think the whole area around identifying gaps and eliminating duplication, that probably is a really strategic approach, because up until now, probably within our unity expression, we have, we have sought to honor and love each other and support each other, whatever we're doing. But sometimes we're going to need to actually say, do you know, there's a real gap there. Can anybody respond? Or we may be wanting to have a hard conversation to say, do you really need 3 food banks in the same street? So it's around that kind of conversation, but it does become a support structure, an increasing support structure. And I know a number of you already have that. Thank you, Kay. We also think it's about a big conversation. And the big conversation really is about the renewal of our cities, isn't it? We are responding to the recovery, but we are also looking forward to the renewal of our places. And this, of course, is on our hearts and has been on our hearts for many, many years. What kind of city do we actually want to live in? What are the values that we're going to build on going forward? And how do we best help people out of poverty? Those are some of the questions. There will be other questions. Now, this conversation isn't just amongst ourselves. What we're really hoping and praying for is that the movement for recovery can actually begin this conversation in the public space as well, not just the church space. Quite how this develops, we're not quite sure, but we just sense that this is part and parcel of this conversation. So pushing forward the values of the kingdom to enable them to begin to shape what our cities and our towns could look like in the future. That's the big conversation, and we'll know more about that as we develop this further. Thanks, Kay. Let me lead you with the values that we think this is based on. Firstly, of course, listening to God. This isn't just a social action enterprise. We are here to listen to God as well, and we're here to respond to what He is doing in our places, and we're here to take our leadership from Him ultimately. We will, of course, listen to our city and I'll listen to our town, because that's absolutely vital. And I'm always challenged actually by the Australians who really challenge us to listen to the cry of the city. What is really happening? Where is the pain? Where is the pain? And how can we get there and be God's hands of healing into those places of pain? So we're listening to God. We're listening to the city. Of course, we're bringing all the core unity values which we know and we have learned about: honor, respect, love amongst each other. Stop trying to do your own thing in your own time without any reference to anybody else. We're part of the body. We're here together to stand together. And all those core unity values we take into the movement for recovery. The fourth point in the value, I think, is that every ministry flourishes. And I think this is quite important. If we're setting up a network of networks and a movement for recovery, it's important that the ministries don't feel as though somehow they're being usurped, that somehow they're being taken over, because that's not the case at all. In this system, every ministry should flourish. Now, we may be challenged and we may have to change, but that will come from God's leading, not from, this isn't a top-down approach. This is simply connecting what we do better. Fifthly, I think it's working smarter and not harder. I think we're terribly aware of the pressures around charities at the moment, church leaders in particular. And I think one of the fears will be that somehow we set something up that creates a whole load of raft of new work or action lists that we have to then do. This isn't really about that. It will be some extra work for some people, but essentially it will be about working smarter together. And I think the proof in the pudding will be whether that actually happens. Sixthly, every place is unique. And although we're going to talk about vision and values, which you think are really important, every place is going to have to develop its own movement for recovery. How Sunderland reacts to this will be different to Bath, and the needs of London will be, different to Nottingham. And we need to be very aware of that. This must be contextualized. It must be localized. And then I think lastly, we're a movement, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that at the end. But I think this is more than just being a network. This is actually about being a movement going together. And I think what I'm sensing in this whole enterprise and the conversations we have had with Andy Burnham, the conversations that our Bristol friends have had with Marvin Rees, the conversations in recent days where the London grouping has been having with Sadiq Khan. We're part of a movement which is actually national and will increasingly become public. And therefore, our commitment to each other will be a commitment to each other on a national basis, not just a local basis. So I'll talk a bit more about that at the end, but I think that essentially is something that God seems to be developing. We're hoping, I know London is hoping to have a call with Sadiq Khan in certainly post the elections, and we're going to have another one with Andy Burnham post the elections. I'm not quite sure what Bristol are doing, but they have a constant contact with Marvin anyway. But we're hoping to get Marvin and Andy and Sadiq on one call together and have a national call, and then talk about the movement for recovery in our places and get a whole load of more cities involved and engaged. So that's something of the values and something of the vision as we take it forward.